I am an R user. We teach all of our courses using R. We have increasingly embraced the use of R Markdown in our teaching and in all of our course material preparation, largely because I am heavily involved in forcing that change. I'm involved because R Markdown is accessible in its raw state and is as accessible as any material is going to be without serious human intervention once it's processed into HTML. I would say that the improvements in R Markdown over what I was doing in LaTeX are the single greatest influence on my employability and have changed me from being a person that is hugely dependent on cited assistance for document preparation and verification 10 years ago to someone who now uses cited assistance occasionally for cosmetic reasons, not for content reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Derek, would you be willing to go now?
Hi, my name is Derek Kearney. I happen to be a co-worker of Eway at RStudio. I found out about this talk through another friend of mine at Purdue University, and so this is an interesting combination of tools. I originally wrote my thesis in LaTeX, and then but now today I write all of my notes for when I'm doing work and stuff in R Markdown, just as a way to keep stuff organized for myself. So every day I have a new R Markdown file that I write my notes in.
Okay. Is there anybody else who's would you like to introduce yourself, Weezy, as an R user?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Yihui. I'm a software engineer at RStudio, and I'm also one of the main authors of R Markdown. Originally, actually, first I wrote the R package called Knitr, which is an implementation of literate programming. And actually, when I started writing Knitr, the original language that we use, literate programming is a programming paradigm that combines the programming code and the narratives or prose or whatever. It combines the document language and the programming language. So originally Knitr was mainly using R and LaTeX. Oh, actually, how do you pronounce LaTeX here? LaTeX or LaTeX?
I've heard 3 or 4 different pronunciations just in this conference.
Okay. If you don't mind, I would say LaTeX. Knitr originally combined the R language with LaTeX. That idea was not new. It was from another tool named SWeave. So basically, Knitr re-implemented that idea. And a couple of years later, we found that Markdown was actually, of course, Markdown was much simpler than LaTeX. And there was another tool called Pandoc, which can be used to convert Markdown to LaTeX. So then we built R Markdown on top of the idea, the original idea of Knitr. So basically, we changed the documentation language from LaTeX to Markdown. Just to clarify, the raw LaTeX is still supported in the Knitr package. Yeah, we didn't throw LaTeX away. It's still supported, but you can also use the documentation language Markdown. So I guess maybe I can share my screen. So I can talk a little bit about the TinyText. Jonathan, I guess you muted it yourself.
Your mic's off, Jonathan.
Okay. So I wonder if Nelson would be willing to go first as the most senior member here from the tech side of things.
Jonathan, Yves
Yeah.
was asking for permission to share his screen.
Oh,
You have to be the one to give him that permission.
yeah. Can we do that when we finish introductions? I'd like
Sure,
to.
yeah, of course.
Nelson, would you be willing to kick off the tech side?
Okay. So on the pronunciation of LATEX, I can report that many years ago I was in a meeting at one of the TUG meetings with Leslie Lamport, and he was asked exactly that question: how do you pronounce it? And he admitted that LaTeX and LaTeX were in common use. The one thing you must never say is LA Tech, because Los Angeles is quite a ways from Stanford. Yeah, so the origins of LaTeX or LaTeX, and I confess I use both of those, are really in a system developed by Brian Reed as part of his PhD thesis at Carnegie Mellon University in the early 1980s. And Brian was, once he graduated, was immediately hired by Stanford Research Institute. And so he and Leslie were in relatively close proximity. And what Brian had done was to develop a markup system in which the commands began with an @ sign rather than a backslash, but was essentially a logical markup system where you say @ sign chapter, @ sign section, and so on. And if you've seen BibTeX entries, they also came from Scribe. And so Leslie merely adopted this idea, and BibTeX was taken over essentially unchanged from Scribe. Every Scribe database file is a perfectly valid BibTeX file. And I think the important thing about LaTeX is it gets people to concentrate on what they're writing about rather than on what it looks like. The word processor approach, where it's continually reformatting to match a current view with a certain set of fonts and point sizes and so on, means people spend a lot of time worrying about what it looks like on the screen instead of worrying about content. And I think the history has shown that the content-based markup is much more successful. Of course, SGML and XML also take that approach, and publishers are very happy to have it. In fact, just to show you the importance of XML in the publishing industry, at one of the TUG meetings of publishers some years ago in the humanities told us that with the markup in XML that they have of papers in their journal field, they can sometimes sell an article as many as 50 times in different formats. So in other words, they paid for its production once, but they sold it 50 times. So it's really important for their profit margin and their document management. And several publishers now, for example, will offer a special textbook for a class where the author has requested chapters from this book and this other book, and they're put together and they're produced in a small production run and sold to the class. So that's sort of the background of LaTeX, and our Markdown is a very simplified, and Markdown is a very simplified form of that. It's not clear to me that it's suitable for large amounts of mathematics, but perhaps people who use it couldn't comment on it. I don't personally use R myself, but I'm the maintainer of our software. And I can mention that just about probably 5 years ago now, we were faced with increasing costs from commercial statistical software packages, of which we've had many. And our statistics faculty got together and said, you know, we really can do our teaching entirely with R, NS Plus, its predecessor. And that's what we've been doing since. And one of the instructors told me a couple of years ago that this has really been an advance. He said, because the problem with the commercial packages was that the students viewed them as a system in which they pulled down a menu to do an operation of statistical significance on some data, but they had no idea that was going on. And by doing it in R, they really understand that this is a programming problem and you're dealing with data. And it's been much more successful in their understanding of statistics.
Excellent. I'll introduce myself. I'll try to be brief. I used to work at the Open University in Milton Keynes, United Kingdom, as LaTeX officer and was responsible for publishing, for production of course materials in physics and mathematics, not the content, the production. Since then, I've retired and I've returned to my main interest, which is pure mathematics research. And by habit, I'm a Python programmer rather than an R programmer, and I'm a pure mathematician, so I sort of don't deal with practical statistics. But I've been impressed by R and learn about it secondhand on the Python list, and now I'm getting more contact with it. I was very keen to invite we first of all because of the tiny tech and the way in which the enormous tech has become made manageable, so that it sits inside part of a larger system. A full TeX-Live installation is a large system by itself, and it doesn't sit well inside a small system or moderate size system. Perhaps Philip could go next, and then the three people we haven't seen before can introduce themselves if they wish to. It's optional. So could you introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, I'm just a user of LaTeX and BibTeX, and I stumbled upon this series of conferences about 4 or 5 weeks ago and have been following them ever since. They've turned out to be quite interesting. And I think I put that down to the COVID pandemic, because before I had no experience with video conferences at all. And the pandemic forced everyone to learn about this stuff. And I said, well, now that I know how it works, I started looking into when I saw an announcement for some sort of conference or online talk or whatever. And yeah, so that's why I'm here.
Okay. Dayan, if I've got your name right, would you like to introduce yourself or pass?
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you for organizing. I'm a newcomer to the meeting, and I'm excited to talk today. I'm a developer with the LaTeX ML project, which is a converter from LaTeX to HTML5 based at the Digital Library of Mathematical Function at NIST in Washington, D.C. And in one of my previous endeavors, I worked at Authoria, which was and still is a very interesting integration experiment between LaTeX, Markdown, and rich text editing with a unified front end, but 3 separate backends. So to me, it's very interesting to hear about the tiny tech and how that relates to TeX-Live, because the dependence on something as large as TeX-Live is very important to LaTeX ML and very heavy for LaTeX ML. So yeah, I'm just glad to be here, and thank you for organizing.
Thank you for telling us, and your involvement with LaTeX ML certainly interests me. Catherine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I suppose I am a user primarily, but I'm a learner. I'm stumbling my way through learning it. I'm a graduate student at the University of California, Davis in the US, and I'm studying plants there. So I have interest in what I'm studying, and I'm using and statistics as tools rather than the primary thing I'm interested in. So doing all of this with the accessible technology is something I'm very interested in, so I can make things happen as easily as possible.
Thank you, Catherine. And it's nice to say that you study data rather than statistics. There was a time when I wouldn't see the difference. Alberto, would you like to introduce yourself or pass?
In any case, your microphone is off.
No.
Alberto's.
Alberto? Okay. Arthur, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Arthur Ogawa, and I sit in Kauai country in California. I guess my involvement is with professional publishing as a consultant and I would call myself a LaTeX expert. And I have an abiding interest in descriptive markup, such as Nelson described. I pronounce it LaTeX because that's what I heard Leslie Lamport say. But I was there when he said, "There's only one pronunciation I do not want to hear you use."
But
That means we're permitted, you see, to call it LaTeX as well.
Speaking of pronunciation, is it Lamport or Lamport?
I've never heard him pronounce his last name to my memory.
And I've always heard it Lamport, but I can't tell you whether I've heard him pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're getting a little bit off topic here.
Yeah, we're firmly off topic.
It would be well on topic if Leslie Lamport was here himself.